My colleagues manage with this, so stop complaining when you haven't contributed to the ascent. That's what James exclaimed as he threw $300 at me for our monthly expenses. The kind husband I thought I had was nowhere to be found. Holding on to that money, I smiled brightly and replied, I contribute $2,000 to our home every month. Seeing the shocked look on James's face, I stood up to meet his gaze. Do you even know our monthly rent? What are you talking about? It's probably around $100, right? Even if we lived in rural Nebraska, can you really expect to rent a 3-bedroom apartment with soundproofing for just $100? Holding back my urge to yell, I quietly placed the divorce lawyer's business card on the desk. Whoa, what's gotten into you? Calm down. James tried to soothe me, his lips quivering. But I calmly responded, it's not sudden, it's all according to plan. I stared at James with cold eyes, his shock rendering him speechless. My revenge had only just begun. My name is Emily Parker. I'm a 35-year-old housewife and a piano teacher. Before getting married, I worked at a music school, but after marriage, I started offering private lessons at home. Juggling household chores, childcare, and teaching piano, my days are pretty packed. I married James when I was 28. We met at a charity concert organized by the piano school where I worked. James helped coordinate equipment and acted as a liaison between us and the venue. He wasn't exactly adept at his job, but he was quick to bond with the venue staff, ensuring smooth negotiations. James asked for my contact information on our way home from the after-party of the competition. I accepted James's invitation for a date, and we began to go out together. Before I knew it, our relationship blossomed, and we got married on our 3rd anniversary. James and I have 2 children. One is a boy who looks just like James, and the other is a girl who looks just like me. People often say that boys resemble their mothers and girls their fathers, but in our case, it was the exact opposite. We used to joke about that. We were a very close-knit family, always going shopping together. However, once our children started elementary school, James began acting strange. I'll be home late again. You've been busy lately, haven't you? My husband, who only occasionally worked overtime at the beginning or end of the month, suddenly had many late nights. He would always come home late, reeking of alcohol. He mentioned that since he switched to a sales job, he had a lot of client dinners. I thought, gee, working in a company must be tough. Thankfully, since I didn't accept students for evening piano lessons, our children were never left alone at night. Because of this, I felt a strong responsibility to support James to the best of my ability. However, he gradually began to show a colder attitude towards me. At first, it was small complaints about meals or housekeeping, but soon he started nitpicking about how I spent money. Hey, what's for dinner today? It's unfair that the meal for the breadwinner, which is me, is the same as for you and the kids. Mine should be more extravagant. Well, I work too, you know, and the kids are growing. They need proper meals. Stop being so selfish. Only young women can get away with that. Stop making excuses and listen to me. Forget it. I'm gonna eat out. With that, James left, leaving me and the kids in shock. I felt anger rising, but seeing my children frightened by James's outburst, I decided it was more important to comfort them. I chose not to worry about where James went. But from that day on, James's behavior changed drastically. Apart from weekday overtime, he also started working more weekends. Despite complaining, I saw a delighted James getting ready, and I couldn't help but feel this isn't about work. Women's intuition, as they say. Observing James closely, I started noticing red flags. He never had an interest in fashion before, but suddenly he began buying brands that younger people would like. He also started spending late nights on the phone out on our balcony, and I noticed a transaction for women's jewelry on our credit card statement. The final straw came when James began dictating how our household expenses should be managed. All these years, you've been overspending, which limited what I could do. From now on, our monthly budget is $300. Got it? $300. That's impossible. Just the groceries for the four of us cost over $500. That's because you're being extravagant. From now on, I'll spend as I please. If you want to spend money, earn more yourself. True to his word, James only gave me $300 from the next month. I managed with my earnings and some savings, but it wasn't enough to maintain the lifestyle James expected. For the first time, I seriously considered divorce. Whether there was another woman or not, I used to think it was okay if he came back to us before the kids grew up. But when I thought about whether my children needed a father who acted irresponsibly and didn't care for his family, I felt that maybe we didn't need James. I was still hesitant, but then something happened that made my decision clear. It was a Sunday morning, and I was making breakfast. James, who usually leaves early, was still home. The kids went into his bedroom, hoping to play with him. Then, with a loud voice that could probably be heard outside, James yelled at them, "Would you shut up? Hey, why'd you yell out of nowhere like that? Isn't taking care of the kids your job? Stop slacking off." He snapped at me. "You're their father too, you know," I replied. I don't need noisy kids around. I'm trying to get some rest here." "Keep 'em quiet," he retorted. I held back from saying out loud what I was really thinking. "The reason you're tired is probably because you've been staying out late every night, maybe cheating on me." The kids were clearly frightened, hiding behind me. Seeing them like that solidified the idea of divorce in my mind. I needed to protect my kids. As I looked at James, now snoring loudly in bed, I made up my mind. Later, I started by checking my own finances. Could I maintain our lifestyle while continuing my classes from home? And what about the kids' future? To my surprise, I realized I could sustain our lifestyle on my income alone. The reason our expenses had shot up was because of the family credit card we both used. James seemed to forget it was a family card and had been using it liberally. Sometimes, the bills even exceeded $1,000 a month. I had only been checking the total amounts, but James's charges started increasing right around when he began working late. They were all at fancy restaurants and hotels, the kind you go to for a romantic getaway. As I realized he might be using our family card for trysts with his affair, my love for James cooled to absolute zero. Confronting him now might just make him hide the affair, so I decided to make sure our finances were rock solid and then corner him once everything was set. About 3 months after learning about James's affair, I managed to gather all the evidence. James had no idea I was onto him, so gathering evidence was a breeze. No need for a private investigator. Then, on James's payday, I decided it was time to make my move. James was in high spirits that morning, maybe getting ready for a date with his mistress. He was humming while picking out his clothes. I approached him cautiously and said, "Hey, isn't it payday today? The $300 you've been giving for household expenses isn't cutting it. I think you'd understand if you checked our finances." "Will you stop with the excuses? It's all your incompetence. You've ruined my mood," he snapped angrily. I persisted, "But it's not enough. At this rate, we might have to sell the house." James sighed dramatically and ran his fingers through his hair. He took out his wallet, pulled out 3 bills, and waved them at me. "My colleagues get by with this. You haven't contributed in a cent, so stop complaining," he said, throwing the $300 meant for our expenses at me. The kind and loving husband I had married was nowhere to be found. I clenched the money and smiled back at him. "I put $2,000 into our home every month," I stated. James looked at me with a blank expression. Standing up, I met his gaze and asked, "Do you even know how much the rent for this house is?" "What are you talking about?" It's probably around 100, right? Regardless of where we live, can you really believe we can live in a 3-bedroom house with a mortgage for just $100? I retorted, holding back my urge to yell. I quietly placed the divorce lawyer's business card on the desk. Michelle, what's going on? Calm down, James said, trying to soothe me with a twisted smile. It's not sudden, it's all according to plan, I replied coldly. James looked shocked, at a loss for words. I stared back with indifferent eyes. The revenge had only just begun. To make things clearer, I placed another set of documents on the table. Seeing them, James's face turned pale. What does this mean? He asked, flustered. These are my income statements and our household expenses, I explained, showing him our household ledger, the house contract, and a copy of the account book we report to the IRS. The ledger detailed our monthly expenses, and the house contract showed the monthly mortgage repayment. You're lying about the $1,000 rent, he accused. No matter how rural Nebraska is, it's a custom-built house with a soundproof room. There's no way we could live here for just $100 a month, I countered. The house we live in was custom-built when we had our child, with both our parents contributing to the down payment. It was my dream house, made possible by my job and our family's support. But even with our parents paying half the price up front, our monthly payments were higher than the neighboring rental properties. We did discuss the price with James at the time, but he brushed it off, saying, I'll leave it to you, Michelle. I used to think he trusted me, but now I see he just found the topic tedious. Why didn't you consult me properly? Isn't that a waste too? James argued. Oh, I did. You just didn't engage. Besides, half of the rent came from my piano lesson earnings, and ever since you only contributed $300 for living expenses, I've been covering everything else. You have no right to complain, I shot back. James was speechless but didn't look convinced. He glared at me then, as if recalling something, smirked. Fine, my bad about the rent, but you should have shown me these papers earlier. I would have thought about it then, he said. Who was the one barely home to discuss these matters? I retorted. All right then. Just add the rent to the $300 living expenses. If you have an income too, why should I bear all the expenses? He seemed to be on the defensive now, looking closely at the household ledger. He began marking it with a red pen. This, and this, all unnecessary expenses. We don't need these lessons. Look, it can be managed with $300. You just spend too much. So he has money for his mistress, but not for our children. I was boiling inside, but it was too early to bring that up. I glanced at the clock and then gave James a sweet smile. Do you know the average monthly grocery bill for a family of 4? Around $120, ain't it? That's why $300 is more than enough. On average, it's $870. What? That's right. The average for a family of 4 is close to $900. Our grocery bills are usually around $600. That's after cutting corners wherever possible. James was lost in thought. Why didn't he realize that living on $300 a month was impossible? I began to feel a headache coming on. So, you can't live on $300. Do you get that? No way. What? It's a lie. James started acting like a child, vehemently denying the truth. I looked at him in disbelief. What I once found endearing about his childlike qualities now seemed creepy, especially for a man in his 40s. My colleague said he can live on $300 a month. You must have altered the numbers, he insisted. Exasperated, I replied, well, maybe Lisa, a 22-year-old newbie still living with her parents, can manage with that amount. The mention of her name caught James off guard, and his confidence vanished. Cold sweat started forming as he stood there. I laid out a few pictures and credit card statements on the table. Lisa Johnson, 22, lives with her working dad and stay-at-home mom. After the party for the new employees, one thing led to another with you. I know about your affair that started after you played the gentleman and sent her home. How do you know all this? James asked, shocked. Because she told me herself. What? It's rare for a wife to hear details of an affair straight from the other woman, I said calmly. Oh, I became friends with her on social media. It was easy. I just approached her, saying I too was having an affair. She quickly spilled the beans and even shared photos. But how? James stammered. In the age of information, you've got to be careful. She shared photos like this one. I placed a picture of them in a compromising position in front of him. James, eyes darting around, was sweating profusely. Oh, and she should be receiving one of these soon. Receiving what? He'd asked, clearly nervous. This legal notice, I said, handing him a certified letter. It was an official document my lawyer had prepared while I gathered evidence. As James read through it, his face turned pale. $5,000. I can't afford that. Your father said that amount was reasonable, didn't he? What? You told my parents? Of course. They should be here any moment, I said just as the doorbell rang. I simply replied, come in, to the person on the intercom and return to the living room. Michelle, is everything sorted? Yes, thank you. Right on time, I responded. My mother-in-law stood behind her husband, looking utterly devastated. My father-in-law, usually a calm man, was red with rage. He approached James and landed a solid punch. Ouch! What was that for, Dad? James exclaimed. You're no son of mine, betraying Michelle like that. You're the worst. I'm gonna knock some sense into that rotten character of yours. James was in shock, and frankly, seeing my father-in-law this angry was a first for me too. Now that everyone involved is here, I'd like to resume our discussion. Please have a seat over here, I said, pointing to the chairs I'd set up at the end of the table. My in-laws and the other guests took their seats as instructed. Once everyone was seated, I resumed the conversation with a smile. Now, Lisa, please introduce yourself. I'm Lisa, 22 years old. I'm so sorry. James invited me, and I couldn't refuse. That act is quite enough. Huh. Lisa pretended to cry and kept apologizing, but I cut her off. Caught off guard by my unexpected attitude, she looked shocked. She probably wanted to play the innocent role of a young new hire who couldn't say no to her boss. Unfortunately for her, I knew all about her plans. You told me everything, didn't you? On Instagram, right? Miss Sweet Pea. No way. Lisa turned pale and stared at me as if she had seen a ghost. Her parents looked at her in confusion. I then spread out the printed conversation between Lisa and me on the table for everyone to see. The conversation detailed a shameful account of their affair. Lisa's parents seemed to shift between anger and embarrassment. After a while, her mother stood up and slapped her. Ouch! What was that for? Lisa protested. You told me you were confused because you didn't know he was married and got a legal document about it. What is this? You knew he was married, encouraged him to divorce his wife, and then there's all this trash talk. Lisa's mother seemed very sensitive about the subject and began to tear up. I did feel a bit sorry for her, but it was a mess her daughter had gotten into. Plus, it'd be good for her to know what I'd be talking about next. Also, seeing your husband every day and then hitting on another married man from the same department. That's some stamina. Wait, that's... James's face was filled with disbelief as he listened to my words. When Lisa seemed very flustered, it seemed he realized it was true. Fuming, James stood up, grabbed Lisa by both shoulders, and yelled, You had another man besides me. Who is it? Do you know how much money I spent on you? And you cheat on me, you wretched woman. Hey, you were the one who made the first move on me, even though you have a wife and kids. It's a privilege for you to date a young and cute girl like me. What? How can you be so deluded? Watching the two of them bicker, I sighed. Blaming each other while ignoring their own faults. There's only so much foolishness one can tolerate. It seemed I wasn't the only one who felt this way, Both sets of parents looked utterly dumbfounded. Then Lisa's father, who had been silent until now, stood up. The arguing between James and Lisa stopped immediately. Lisa's father began speaking slowly. "Michelle, I deeply apologize for everything. We want to cover the damages for emotional distress. We know a dairy farmer looking for help, and we'll send Lisa there to work off the debt. She won't leave until she pays us back in full, and we won't provide any assistance. I don't think this makes up for everything, but does this solution work for you?" I nodded. I'd rather not have her name appearing in my bank account every month, so I appreciate your offer. Whether you cut ties with her is up to you. Lisa's father left with Lisa and her mother. As soon as they were gone, I felt a sense of resolution. But then James said something surprising. "Hey, Lisa had me fooled. So, can we start over? I'll do whatever you say." "No, that's fine. I can't stand being with you anymore. Let's get a divorce and I'll be seeking child support and division of assets." "What? No way." James slumped back into his chair, looking dejected. My father-in-law forcefully dragged James out of the house and took him back to their family home. Finally, it was over. Alone in the living room, I took a deep breath, relaxed, and then started preparing dinner for my children, who would be home soon. Later, James and I divorced without any issues. James's parents were furious, and even his mother said she never wanted to see his face again. James was cut off from his in-laws and didn't receive any financial support. He asked if he could pay me in installments, but I refused. As a result, James had to take on debt to pay the alimony. His affair with Lisa was exposed, and while he managed to keep his job, he was moved to a lesser role with a 40% salary cut. With his reduced income and debt to repay, he had to work part-time at construction sites at night and on weekends. As for Lisa, she's working non-stop at a relative's ranch. She used to love cosmetics, but now she's in a place where the only nearby salon is run by elderly women in their 70s. She can't afford makeup or get her nails done. Every day, she laments that things didn't turn out as she expected. She's also being sued for alimony by the wife of another man she had an affair with. It seems her liberation isn't coming anytime soon. As for me, I'm living happily with my 2 kids. My piano lessons have become more popular, and since I started offering evening classes 3 times a week, they've been fully booked by adults wanting to learn piano. My income has steadily increased. I thought my kids would be sad after the divorce, but it turns out I was the only one who felt that way. They even told me, "We like you even more after the divorce, Mom. You're cooler now." That made me a bit happy. Education will cost a lot, but if things continue this way, I'll be able to save enough for my children's future paths. Listening to the beautiful melodies my students play on the piano, my heart dances with excitement for the bright future ahead.
My name is Olivia Johnson, and I'm 36 years old. I have a husband who is 3 years older than me, and we have a son in elementary school. 5 years ago, my husband had an accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down. He had to quit his job, which was really tough for him because he used to be the best salesman in his department. After the accident, he started getting angry with our son and me over small things. Sometimes he would only realize what he was doing when he saw our son crying. I learned to handle him better and told our son to stay away from his dad when I wasn't around. That helped to reduce the outbursts. Then I started working full-time to support our family. Even though I worked hard, I couldn't earn as much as my husband used to, so I took extra shifts whenever I could to make more money. It was tiring, but I thought I was doing it for my family. I didn't notice how much I was changing until a friend from high school pointed it out. She said I looked very different and much older than before. Her words hurt, but they were true. I used to care a lot about fashion and makeup, but now I focus on practical things and don't keep up with the latest trends. But even after realizing this, I don't have the luxury to enjoy fashion like I used to. Though I felt somewhat pessimistic, I reminded myself that this is only temporary. In a few weeks, our multi-generational home will be completed. The plan is for my family and my in-laws to live there. My in-laws suggested this to help lessen my load a bit. I felt bad about it, but I accepted their offer. My husband was also supportive of the idea. Since we decided on the multi-generational home, he's been in high spirits. He's usually quiet and hard to read, but lately he's been starting conversations with me and our son more often. Our son, not used to his dad talking to him, seems confused but also a bit happy. Before, my husband would yell at our son for reasons that didn't make sense, and our son became overly sensitive to his dad's mood. I had been struggling to improve their relationship, hoping that living in a duplex might help. But when our long-awaited duplex was finally completed, my husband told me he had something to discuss. He mentioned that my mother-in-law would also be present, and I had a bad feeling about it. Despite my apprehension, my husband began to speak with a smile on his face. "I can finally tell you, Olivia," he said. "I was advised to keep silent until the duplex was finished, but I've been looking forward to this day." I was puzzled, not quite grasping what he was trying to convey. Then, with a casual tone, as if he were talking about today's weather, he said, "Olivia, let's get a divorce, and from now on, let's lead separate lives." It took me a few minutes to understand my husband's words. However, it seemed he took my silence as an agreement and triumphantly spread a divorce paper on the table. The document looked legitimate, with signatures from both him and my in-laws. Unable to accept the reality, I looked up, thinking it might be some kind of distasteful prank. But my husband's expression instantly crumbled that thought. I felt the determined resolve in his eyes, a promise to absolutely divorce me. Instinctively, I turned to my mother-in-law for support. But with an unreadable expression, she simply said, "Sign the paper." I felt betrayed. I thought things were going well with both my husband and my mother-in-law. But perhaps it was only me. Tears welled up as I bit my lower lip and looked down. Meanwhile, my husband continued to speak. "You could take our son, Olivia," he said. "He would be happier. Besides, with my health condition, it's impossible for me to take care of him." I cut him off. "Hold on. I never agreed to getting a divorce. You never said anything about this. You can't just decide all this on your own." I voiced my displeasure. During the brief silence, I asked, "First off, what do you plan to do without me? Do you realize how much I've supported you?" As soon as my husband heard these words, his expression changed. His face turned red, and he glared at me, yelling, "That's what I can't stand about you, your self-righteous way of talking. I didn't choose to be like this, yet you always look worn out, acting as if you're the only one suffering. I feel blamed every time. I'm fed up with you and your victim complex." I lost my words, hearing the true feelings of my husband. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. Seeing me crying, my husband looked annoyed and said, "See, you always play the victim, right, Mom? You'd agree that a wife like her who can't even respect her husband isn't suitable for me, right? Don't worry, my new partner is young and beautiful, and I'm sure you'll like her." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Finally, I understood the real reason why my husband wanted a divorce. He was having an affair, and he was trying to get rid of me, the obstacle to be with his mistress. I never thought my husband would cheat on me, not because of his personality, but because I thought there was no chance for him to meet someone else. But I was wrong. He told me how he met his mistress. He met her online, and through texting each other every day, they developed feelings and fell in love. Learning about this whole online dating thing was bewildering for me. Looking back, my husband had been glued to his phone recently. Moreover, when he was engrossed in his phone, he seemed to be in an exceptionally good mood, oblivious to my husband's affair. I would think to myself, it's nice to see him in a good mood today. Yet, for all I knew, he may have been secretly inviting that woman over to our place when I wasn't around. Just the thought of it was enough to make my blood boil. Despite our arguments, I had never once considered leaving him before. But now, after hearing his true feelings, I just couldn't imagine being with him any longer. even if he took back his words and said, "I don't want a divorce after all." I was now determined to leave him. As I made this decision, I heard a loud slap. Startled, I looked up to see my mother-in-law, her face twisted in an expression I had never seen before. My husband's cheek bore a red handprint. Realizing she had slapped him, I was taken aback. I would never have expected my mother-in-law to lay a hand on her son. She turned to me, deeply bowing her head in apology. "I'm really sorry. I apologize for letting you take care of such a despicable son." As she uttered these words, her face a mask of profound regret, my mother-in-law said, "Olivia, you're too good for my son. You've done so much for him, more than we could ever thank you for. My husband and I were looking forward to living with you too, but it seems you'll be better off without our son." She continued, "We will make sure you receive proper alimony and child support, so please go ahead and divorce him." My husband, his face beet red, tried to retort, but a glare from his mother shut him up. A different kind of tears welled up at my mother-in-law's words. They brought both relief and sadness. Regardless of my husband, I was saddened at the prospect of ending my relationship with my in-laws. Encouraged by my mother-in-law, I filled out the divorce papers. And just like that, my husband and I became strangers. After parting with him, I returned to my parents' house with my son. They said it was fine to stay with them until things settled down, so I decided to take them up on their offer. I planned to continue working as before but discussed reducing my workload with my boss. I was considering changing jobs if needed, but my boss agreed to accommodate me without hesitation. To be honest, it took me by surprise. Apparently, my boss had been worried about my excessive workload for a while now. With a wry smile, he said, "I was actually worried you might collapse one day, but knowing your situation at home, I didn't say anything." Feeling guilty, I bowed my head and apologized to my boss for causing him concern. He quickly shook his head, saying, No, it's just me worrying too much. But thinking about it, it's good that you left your ex-husband." His words brought a smile to my face, and I nodded in agreement. I'd also told my coworkers about my divorce. I thought it would be better to let everyone know since I was reducing my workload. I was anxious about their reaction, but when I honestly told them the reason for my divorce, they threw a party for me. I was taken aback by this, but it was a relief that the atmosphere didn't become serious. Although I had awful luck with men, I had the best colleagues at my workplace. By the time all the paperwork had settled, I took our son and left my parents' home. We chose a small apartment as our new home. It was a far cry from the spacious house we were supposed to be living in, but our son didn't show any discontent. Perhaps because he no longer had to worry about his father, he became more vocal about his opinions, and his demeanor brightened. It was a change that made me truly appreciate our separation from my ex-husband. The effects of the separation were apparent in me too. By the time I'd finished unpacking after the move, a friend came to visit and celebrate our new home. The last time we met, she was concerned about my well-being, but when she saw me today, she laughed and said that I looked younger than ever. I couldn't help but laugh along. Everything started going smoothly, almost comically so, after the divorce. I suppose my old self was under so much stress, physically and mentally. Now I realized I was merely a maid for my ex-husband back then. I still can't forgive my ex-husband, and I don't want to see him, but I do meet my in-laws once a month now. A while ago, my son got a fever, but I absolutely couldn't take a day off of work that day. And to make matters worse, my parents weren't available either. Out of desperation, I reached out to my in-laws. They immediately came over to take care of my son. We used to barely communicate due to the situation with my ex-husband, but since that day, we make sure to meet at least once a month. They thanked me for letting them see their grandson, but I was grateful that they still loved my son even after the divorce. My son occasionally mentioned his grandparents, but he never said he wanted to see them, perhaps out of consideration for me. However, he did ask how they were doing. After all, they were his beloved grandparents. To be honest, I didn't want to take his grandparents away from him, so it was a relief to know they wanted to see him too. By the way, my son never once mentioned my ex-husband. Even my in-laws knew that we didn't want to see him. However, my ex-husband had a different idea. I was utterly surprised when I heard from my mother-in-law that my ex-husband was considering getting back with us. I thought that things were going well with his mistress. According to my mother-in-law, the mistress moved in shortly after we left. It seemed like they had it all planned out. The mistress was delighted to see the new house and moved in without even getting permission from my in-laws. They were taken aback but decided to act as if my ex-husband and his new partner didn't exist. At first, the mistress seemed pleased with the minimal interaction with my in-laws, but soon she started showing signs of discontent. Apparently, she thought that my in-laws would be helping with the household chores. She complained about it to my ex-husband. He then said to his parents, "What's this all about? Didn't you promise to help with the housework?" To this, my mother-in-law replied, "We did promise, but that was with Olivia, not with you two," and she ignored anything he said after that. Left with no choice, my ex-husband tried to get the mistress to do everything that I used to do. At first, she reluctantly did as told, but every complaint from my ex-husband caused more strain between them. Eventually, his mistress had enough and left the house, slamming the divorce papers at my ex-husband. I thought to myself, my ex is pretty bad, but that mistress is quite something too. My mother-in-law, with a bitter smile, commented that my ex-husband's behavior afterwards was the real problem. He refused to admit that he was at fault and blamed his mistress for getting dumped by saying that he got tricked by her. Furthermore, there was no one left to take care of my ex now that his mistress was gone. He couldn't rely on my in-laws either. As a result, for some reason, he thought that if we reconciled, everything would return to how it was. He probably has forgotten the things he did. He told my in-laws that he wanted to get back together with me and asked for their help. When I heard about this, I couldn't help but shudder at the thought of living with my ex again. My mother-in-law quickly reassured me, saying, "Don't worry," we firmly refused. My ex, scolded by my in-laws, gave up on seeing me but now wanted to see our son. My in-laws also refused this. Finally, my in-laws told my ex that if he caused any more trouble to me or our son, they would sever family ties and kick him out. This finally made him give up. It would be difficult for my ex, who was well received by his neighbors and friends, to live relying on others besides his family. I'm glad that my in-laws are not on my ex's side. From now on, I plan to make good use of my past experiences and do my best without pushing myself too hard. I'd also want to cherish the time with my son and make lots of memories that we couldn't before. I'm a 49-year-old man, and I've been married to my wife, who is 48 years old, for almost 25 years. We've been together since we were in high school. I always knew I wanted to marry her. We have a 24-year-old daughter. Like any married couple, we've had good times and bad times, but mostly good. My wife is shy and sweet, just like me. But recently, we had a big fight, and she's been acting strange since then. The fight was about something weird, and I don't understand why she got so upset about it. I have a niece who is a little younger than my daughter, around 22 years old. She's the daughter of my older brother, who was 6 years older than me. We were very close growing up. Sadly, my brother passed away 2 years ago in an accident. It was really hard for all of us, especially for my niece, my sister-in-law, and me. For a year after his death, I visited them every weekend with my daughter to check on them. I wanted my wife to come too, but she always had an excuse. So I stopped asking her to come. My wife said she didn't want to intrude on our grief because she wasn't close to my brother, and she would feel awkward and insincere. But I don't think that's a good reason. I didn't push my wife further to join us, but over time, my sister-in-law and I became even closer. I tried to comfort my niece, who was feeling the loss of her father deeply. I felt terrible for her because she was around the same age as my own daughter, and I couldn't imagine how hard it would be for her if I were suddenly gone. So I did my best to support her and be there for her. I think she started to see me as a father figure because recently she asked me to walk her down the aisle at her wedding, which is in 3 weeks. To be honest, I always thought my niece might ask me to walk her down the aisle, and I knew I would say yes without hesitation. It would be an honor, and I believed it's what my late brother would have wanted. So when she asked, I immediately agreed. I assumed my wife would be happy about it too, as she seemed to like my niece. But when I told her, she completely lost it. She started yelling, saying that walking a bride down the aisle is a sacred moment only meant for fathers and daughters, not uncles and nieces. She implied that I was trying to take my brother's place, which I found really hurtful. She even accused me of being selfish and not considering how our own daughter would feel knowing I was walking my niece instead of her. I don't agree with her at all. My wife's sudden outburst was completely unexpected and unlike her usual self. I was so taken aback by her behavior that I didn't know how to respond. I just let her yell at me without defending myself because her words hurt, especially when she accused me of trying to replace my brother. After she finished, I retreated to the guest room and stayed there for a couple of hours. She didn't try to talk to me or apologize, which made me feel even worse. I didn't think any of this was my fault. If she had a problem with my decision, she could have talked to me calmly instead of yelling and making accusations. Although her reaction was extreme, she did raise a valid point about our daughter. She and my niece are close friends, and our daughter was supposed to be her maid of honor at the wedding. I hadn't considered how she might feel about me walking my niece down the aisle before her, despite their friendship. After the fight, once I had calmed down, I decided to check in with my daughter to see how she felt about me walking my niece down the aisle. When I called her, she was excited and said she was glad I agreed. Surprisingly, she already knew about my niece asking me and had given her approval because that's what she thought her uncle would have wanted. I was relieved that my daughter was okay with it, as it showed how close they were, just like my brother and I were. Knowing that my daughter was fine with it reassured me that there was nothing wrong with my decision. My wife's reaction seemed baseless and really hurtful, considering the situation. Feeling frustrated by my wife's reaction, I decided to talk to her about it during dinner. I explained how my daughter was okay with me walking my niece down the aisle, so I planned to go ahead with it. I also mentioned that her comment about me replacing my brother was insensitive, and I expected an apology. However, instead of apologizing, she stuck to her earlier statements, which was shocking. Although she didn't yell this time, we still ended up in a heated argument. Things escalated when she said she would leave me if I walked my niece down the aisle. I was stunned and didn't know how to respond. We haven't spoken for 3 days now because neither of us wants to admit fault. I don't think I did anything wrong. Wanting to walk my niece down the aisle isn't wrong, especially when my daughter doesn't mind it. My wife's argument about it being only for fathers and daughters doesn't hold up, in my opinion. However, I don't want to lose my wife over this. I love her deeply, and these past few days have been tough for both of us. I can't imagine life without her, and I'd be devastated if she left. I'm not sure how we're going to resolve this, but I'm open to any advice or opinions. Am I wrong for wanting to walk my niece down the aisle despite my wife's opposition? Update 1. It's been 5 days since our big fight, and we still haven't spoken to each other. We're both living in the same house, but it feels like there's an invisible barrier between us. Whenever I enter a room, she leaves, and vice versa. It's really tough, and I know she's feeling bad too. I heard her crying in the bedroom last night, and it broke my heart. I wanted to go and comfort her, but I didn't know how to. We've had fights before, but nothing as serious as this. It just really sucks. I'm going to give it one more day, and then I'll talk to her myself. I can't stand this distance and bitterness anymore. I want things to go back to normal between us. Update 2. Today, I planned to talk to my wife, but she surprised me by bringing me breakfast in bed. I was completely stunned after almost 6 days of not speaking to each other. I was still groggy from just waking up, so it was hard to process everything. Her gesture threw me off guard, especially after days of fighting and ignoring each other. She apologized to me for the hurtful remark she made about me wanting to replace my brother. She admitted she regretted saying it as soon as it left her mouth. She explained that she was just so angry that she didn't think things through. When I asked her what exactly she was mad about, she tensed up a bit, and I noticed. She promised to tell me the reason later. She wasn't ready to share the reason with me yet. Clearly, she was embarrassed about it, but I couldn't understand what could be so embarrassing. It must have been something serious. Even though she hadn't told me the reason, she promised she would soon. She explained that she's been carrying this secret for years. I'm really curious about it, and I even tried to convince her to tell me, but she asked me not to pressure her. So, I respected her request and didn't push harder. Despite that, it's been a good day, and I didn't want to ruin it by starting another fight. I'm just glad that my wife and I are talking again. She means everything to me, and I can't imagine life without her by my side. She apologized for threatening to leave me, admitting that she would be miserable without me. We've been together for over 3 decades, which is a very long time. Regardless of her reason, I know I'll forgive her, and she would do the same for me. I understand that some people might not agree with me, but I know my wife better than anyone else. Whatever the reason may be, I'll accept it. All I want is to be with her for the rest of my life, no matter what challenges come our way. That's all that matters to me. Update 3. Hey everyone. It's been 2 days since the last update, and today my wife finally told me the real reason she was so upset about my decision to walk my niece down the aisle. I'm still in shock. I can't believe she kept this secret for over 25 years just to maintain peace within the family. It's crazy. This whole issue wasn't even about my niece or my daughter. It was actually about my sister-in-law. For context, my sister-in-law, my wife, and I all went to the same high school. My wife and I have known each other since middle school and started dating in our freshman year. A few months after my wife and I started dating, she became friends with my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law and I weren't particularly close at first, even though she and my wife were good friends. It was only after she married my brother that she and I became friends. Before that, she was mainly friends with my wife. They were close through college as well, and my sister-in-law was even a bridesmaid at our wedding. That's where she first met my brother. However, after our wedding, my wife started distancing herself from my sister-in-law. The only reason my sister-in-law and I remained involved in each other's lives was because my wife had been friends with her. I don't think I would have kept in touch with my sister-in-law if it weren't for my wife. She's a nice person, but we weren't close back then. My brother married her a year after I married my wife, and 2 years after that, they had their daughter. Given how close my brother and I were, we often tried to organize playdates for our kids. However, my wife never seemed interested in spending time with my brother and his family. We would sometimes argue about it. She always said she was too tired or too busy, but I could tell she was just making excuses to avoid hanging out with them. So I started visiting my brother and his family without my wife, and she would get upset about that too. But sometimes I needed a break, and my daughter loved playing with her cousin. We didn't meet them very often, maybe once or twice every 2 weeks because they lived far away. I never forced my wife to come along since she clearly wasn't interested. When she did join us, she didn't talk much and mostly interacted with me, my brother, or the kids. No matter how hard we tried to make both our wives feel included, it never seemed to work out. My brother and I even tried to get them to tell us why they fell out, but both of them just said they had grown apart. And it was awkward to be around each other. Let's be real, growing apart hardly seems like a genuine reason to completely ignore someone you used to be close with. Especially since my sister-in-law didn't even ask my wife to be her bridesmaid at her wedding. So we knew something was really off. I was certain something had happened around the time of our wedding. However, life got busy. Our kids were growing up, and our responsibilities increased. We stopped seeing each other as often and stopped dwelling on what had happened years ago. We had bigger problems to worry about. But today, I finally learned what caused the tension between my wife and my sister-in-law. As I mentioned earlier, they used to be close friends, that things changed around the time of our wedding. The reason behind that was a couple of days before the wedding, when my wife and her bridesmaids were having a party just for themselves. My sister-in-law got blackout drunk and confessed that she'd been in love with me since sophomore year. She whispered it to my wife, who was horrified but didn't say anything at the time. My wife tried to dismiss it as a meaningless drunken confession, but the next day my sister-in-law admitted it was true but said she wouldn't act on it. Still, my wife let her be a bridesmaid because they didn't want to raise any questions. They just didn't want the hassle of explaining why my wife had removed her friend from the bridal party. However, things were never the same after that. They pretty much stopped talking. When my sister-in-law started dating my brother, my wife became insecure, believing she was only marrying into the family to be close to me. Unbeknownst to us, they even got into a nasty fight about this a few weeks before my brother's wedding. My wife accused my sister-in-law of marrying my brother just to be near me, as she believed that someone doesn't just get over feelings they had for so long in just a few months, especially when the person they're marrying is 6 years older. However, my sister-in-law insisted she truly loved my brother, and their marriage had nothing to do with the past. The fact that my brother and I looked similar didn't help the situation. That fight essentially ended any hope for reconciliation, and over time, the bitterness between them only grew. My wife never told me any of this because she didn't want to ruin my brother's marriage. She wasn't even sure if my sister-in-law still had feelings for me or not. It didn't feel that way to me either, and I guess my wife also believed that my sister-in-law truly loved my brother. That's why she decided to keep this secret, no matter how insecure she felt whenever she saw me spending time with my sister-in-law. Everything reached a breaking point last week when I told my wife about my decision to walk my niece down the aisle. She was already feeling insecure and jealous because I had been visiting my sister-in-law after my brother's death. But unlike before, instead of it being my brother, my sister-in-law, and me, it was just me and her. Those old ugly feelings resurfaced, and she didn't know how to deal with them anymore. She tried to suppress them like before, but it wasn't as effective. When I came home and told her about walking my niece down the aisle, she couldn't shake the image of me, my sister-in-law, and my niece being one happy family from her mind. She couldn't even tell me the real reason behind her behavior, which was frustrating for her. As a result, she ended up saying things she shouldn't have. She knew I was assuming the responsibility out of love and respect for my brother, not because I reciprocated any feelings my sister-in-law had for me. All those years ago, my wife didn't know how to handle the overwhelming feelings she had built up inside her. These feelings resurfaced when she saw how my brother's passing brought me and my sister-in-law closer together. That was the real reason behind her reaction. I must have been silent for about 10 whole minutes after she finished telling me everything because it was a lot to process all at once. I couldn't even imagine how my wife had kept this huge secret to herself for the past 2 decades. It would have driven me crazy. She didn't want to disrupt my brother's home, so she kept the truth to herself all these years. I'm amazed by the incredible strength it must have taken for her to do that. My wife has always put other people's feelings before her own, and I'm proud to be married to her. When I thanked her for telling me the truth and for keeping the secret for so long, she broke down in my arms. I was there for her while she let herself cry for the first time in ages. I'm grateful that she finally told me everything. I don't care what the reason was, I'll stay with her no matter what. It's been a few hours, and we haven't spoken about it further. I think she's too emotionally drained right now, so I'll leave it for later. Update 4. Hey everyone. So there's just a week left before my niece's wedding, and yes, I am still going to walk her down the aisle. Now that everything's out in the open, my wife told me that she doesn't mind. She spent enough time with my niece herself, and she knows that my niece is a good kid who deserves to have a father figure on her special day. It's definitely what my brother would have wanted, so she's fine with it. As for my sister-in-law, we've decided to let sleeping dogs lie. We're never going to bring up the past, at least not by ourselves. My wife trusts me, and she knows I would never do anything to hurt her. She apologized for what she said in that fit of rage, and now that I know the reason behind her anger, I know better than to hold it against her. She also knows better than to hold my connection with my brother's family against me. I'll still help her and my niece whenever they need it. But that's about it. So, we're okay on that front. This secret is going to stay between us for the rest of our lives, and we know it's all for the best. We've also decided that my wife needs to seek therapy because she tends to bottle up her feelings until she finally snaps over something really insignificant. She's almost 50 now, and I think it's about time we address this because I don't want her to suffer anymore. She needs to understand that she doesn't always have to put on a brave face to face the world. She can be vulnerable, at least with me. I mean, she is sometimes, but usually only when things get too overwhelming. I want her to know that things don't have to reach that breaking point before she tells me about her problems. She agrees with me, and I'm glad we're on the same page here. We're in this for the long haul. My life seemed content, at least that's what I believed. Upon graduating from university, I landed a job at the company of my dreams. Shortly after, I met Ben, who would become my husband, and we tied the knot when I turned 25. Ben was not only financially stable, but also incredibly kind-hearted. 3 years into our marriage, our daughter Deborah, or Debbie as we fondly call her, came into our lives. Her arrival seemed perfectly timed, adding joy to our already blissful existence. As a 30-year-old homemaker, I decided to leave my job to focus on nurturing and caring for Debbie, a decision I never regretted. She was turning 2, her infectious laughter filling our home with happiness each day. Watching her grow was a source of immense joy for me. Ben, equally enamored by our daughter, dedicated his free time to her, allowing me moments of respite on weekends. Thanks to his unwavering support, I maintained a well-rounded life. However, this tranquil routine shattered one fateful weekend when my in-laws, Brian and Carol, unexpectedly visited. My encounters with Carol had been infrequent, and truth be told, I harbored some reservations about her. From the onset of our relationship, Carol's disapproval of me was evident. She questioned my suitability as her son's wife, making disparaging remarks about my upbringing. In response, I often engaged in heated exchanges with her, unable to tolerate her negativity. Yet Brian and Ben, averse to conflict, urged restraint, attempting to quell any confrontations. Right from the outset, Carol and I never seemed to see eye to eye. So when Brian and Carol unexpectedly showed up at our doorstep, I was taken aback. Despite my surprise, I had no choice but to welcome them inside. Brian, Carol, what brings you here? I inquired, puzzled by their unannounced visit. Are you daft? We informed you earlier that we'd be coming, Carol retorted sharply. Well, I'm sorry, I must have forgotten to tell you. My parents are visiting today. Ben interjected apologetically, his forgetfulness not uncommon. Frustrated by the oversight, I quickly prepared tea for everyone, attempting to salvage the situation. As we settled down, I inquired, how can we assist you today, Brian and Carol? Surprised by my lack of knowledge, Carol questioned, didn't you hear from Ben? I informed him earlier. Feeling a pang of irritation, I shot a glance at Ben, who appeared uncomfortable but proceeded to speak. Actually, I've been discussing with my parents, and we decided to move in with them. What? I exclaimed, caught off guard by the sudden announcement. Ben explained, with Dad's recent injury, I've been worried about him. Plus, considering their age, it might be best for us to live with them and take care of them. Shocked by Ben's unilateral decision, I struggled to comprehend. Just because you think it's a good idea doesn't mean you shouldn't discuss it with me. This is a significant decision. Ignoring my objections, Carol interjected. Flora, your opinion isn't relevant here. We're more concerned about what Ben thinks. Feeling sidelined in a decision that deeply affected us both, I insisted. This is a matter that concerns both husband and wife. Let Ben and I discuss it and come to a decision together. Carol shot me a disdainful look before storming out of our house for the day. Once they had left, I confronted Ben, my frustration evident. Why didn't you discuss this with me? Deciding something so significant without involving me is not right. I'm sorry, Flora. I was just worried about my dad. Ben apologized, but I wasn't appeased. Being concerned about your dad doesn't excuse ignoring me in such matters. I countered, emphasizing the importance of mutual decision-making. Realizing his mistake, Ben promised to involve me in future decisions. So, what do you think about moving in with my parents? He asked tentatively. Hesitating, I confessed, honestly, I'm not keen on the idea. You know Carol and I don't get along. Ben pleaded, is there any way you could reconsider? I'll do anything. Protect me from your mother. If you can't, we're headed for a divorce, I asserted firmly, expressing the severity of my discomfort. Ben, taken aback, agreed to shield me from Carol's hostility. With his promise, albeit reluctantly, I consented to the arrangement, with a firm resolve to leave if he failed to uphold his commitment. Weeks later, we moved in with Brian and Carol. As we entered, Carol greeted us with a backhanded remark, but Ben, emboldened by our agreement, stood up for me, demanding respect. Though surprised, Carol relented, offering hospitality. Witnessing Ben's support gave me hope that perhaps living with Carol wouldn't be as daunting as I feared. If he could stand up for me, perhaps we could navigate this arrangement together. After settling our luggage in our room, I joined Brian and Carol in the living room for tea when I heard the front door open. It was Alicia, my sister-in-law. I'm home, she announced cheerfully. Are Ben and his family coming over today? She asked Carol. Yes, that's what I told you yesterday, Carol replied. Confused, I wondered if Alicia was now living with us. I had thought she had her own place elsewhere. When I inquired about her living arrangements, Alicia casually mentioned that she had been back living with us for 3 months now, a fact Ben had failed to mention. Ben's oversight frustrated me deeply. I coldly glared at him, mentally noting it as strike one against him. 2 more strikes and he would be out. Apologizing for his forgetfulness, Ben's feeble excuse did little to assuage my annoyance. I resolved to have a serious conversation with him later. Life at Carol's house started as expected, with her asserting dominance and immediately assigning me tasks. Flora, why haven't you cleaned? She demanded one day. I've cleaned my room, I retorted. You haven't cleaned mine or Alicia's room, and the lawn needs mowing, she continued, disregarding my response. Why should I have to do all of that? I questioned. Are you back talking to me? You should be grateful we're letting you stay here, she snapped. I reminded her that we were living there because of Brian's health concerns and that she had invited us. Alicia, siding with Carol, only added to my frustration. Determined to prove them wrong, I took on all the household chores, even mowing the lawn in the scorching heat. Meanwhile, Carol and Alicia played with Debbie, my daughter, without my consent. When Ben returned from work, I relayed everything to him, demanding he address their behavior. During dinner, despite my efforts, Alicia and Carol continued to complain about me, unfazed by my grievances. What is this dish? It's too bland for my taste. I don't think I can finish it, complained Alicia, pushing her plate away. I can't believe she's a housewife and a bad cook, remarked Carol, adding insult to injury. Ben, sensing the tension, intervened, putting down his utensils and addressing his mother and sister. Hey, Alicia, Mom, please don't complain about the food. Flora made it for you to enjoy. Alicia retorted, Ben, why are you defending your wife for this? Don't you have any dignity as a husband? Do you honestly think this food is good? I love Flora's cooking. It's delicious, Ben affirmed, attempting to defuse the situation. Watching Ben fail to stand up to Alicia's dominance, I felt a pang of disappointment. It was the second strike against him in my mind. Despite Ben's feeble defense, the bullying from Alicia and Carol persisted. Every day, they imposed numerous household chores and errands upon me, refusing to accept any objections. Carol even went as far as to assert, "A wife belongs to this family. so it's natural for her to work for the family. You should treat me the same as you treat Carol." Alicia echoed Carol's sentiments, implying that I must obey their commands without question. Frustrated by their unreasonable demands, I began plotting my escape from this oppressive environment, feeling increasingly certain that leaving their house was the only solution. Then, I received a call from my mother informing me that my father had suffered a stroke. While it wasn't severe, he was hospitalized. Hurriedly, I packed my bags to rush back and visit him at the hospital. As I was preparing to leave, Carol entered my room and questioned my actions. "Flora, what are you doing?" Apologizing, I explained, "My mother just called to tell me about my father's stroke. I need to visit him at the hospital." In response, Carol made an outrageous statement. "Who said you can leave? This is your home, and there's no other place for you." Feeling overwhelmed by Carol's demands and the toxic atmosphere, I reached my breaking point. Ignoring her, I left the house. At the hospital, I stayed with my parents for a few days, helping my mother with household tasks. During this time, Carol and Alicia incessantly called and left hostile messages, demanding my return. Their behavior fueled my anger, and thoughts of divorce and leaving Ben's house crossed my mind. Yet, fueled by resentment towards Carol and Alicia, I decided to take revenge. Preparing for revenge required careful planning. Despite my desire to avoid them, I returned to Carol's house. Even upon my return, Carol and Alicia continued to complain. Such nonsense. About 6 months later, during dinner, Carol excitedly announced, "He proposed to me. I'll bring him over for lunch next time." Feeling a surge of satisfaction, I realized the time for revenge had finally arrived. But my smile didn't go unnoticed by Alicia. "Flora, you're happy for me too, right?" Alicia remarked, misinterpreting my expression. A week later, Alicia brought her fiancé, Ken, to the house. Ken, an accomplished professional with a high income, appeared sincere and respectable. Alicia proudly introduced him to everyone, including me. Observing the scene, Carol seemed pleased and offered her blessings to the couple. Seizing the opportunity for revenge, I engaged Ken in conversation as I served tea. "So, will you be living with your parents after marriage?" I asked casually. "Oh, I haven't decided yet," Ken replied. "I'd heard there's a rule here that if your parents are over 60, you have to live with them," I continued. Surprised, Ken's expression changed. "There's no such rule in my family." I proceeded to inform Ken about the supposed rules and the mistreatment I endured from Alicia and Carol. Ken's discomfort grew evident. Unsure, Ken turned to Alicia for confirmation, but she dismissed my claims as jealousy. Determined to expose the truth, I played recordings of Alicia and Carol's bullying in front of everyone. Shocked and dismayed, Ken swiftly ended the engagement, leaving Alicia in tears. Feeling a sense of vindication, I packed my belongings and left the house with Debbie, leaving divorce papers for Ben. Despite Ben's attempts to reconcile, I stood firm in my decision, frustrated by his lack of support throughout our marriage. Later, I learned that both Ben and Alicia continued to leech off Carol without contributing to household chores. Alicia, devastated by the broken engagement, struggled financially, relying solely on her father's pension. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life, working hard and cherishing moments with my daughter. Though saddened by the situation with Brian's family, I found solace in my newfound independence and commitment to providing a better life for my daughter. You can't have children, right? That's why I'm entrusting you with this child. Be grateful. If you can't bear a child, at least contribute to society by raising one. I struggled to comprehend what was being said to me. Then, unbelievably, my sister abandoned her daughter, who was suffering from a rare disease. Is this really what a parent should do? "We will make sure this child is happy and make her regret abandoning her," I vowed. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old and have been a housewife for 8 years. Initially, my in-laws often pressured us about having children. My friends talked about the wonders of parenthood, yet also mentioned the lack of freedom, sleepless nights, and sacrifices made out of love. But my husband and I despise that notion. It's not that we dislike children, we're just not good with them. That's an undeniable fact. After 8 years, it seemed like everyone realized and stopped bringing it up. I know it's selfish, but right now, I have too many things I want to do and can't devote time to a child. Such parents wouldn't be good for any child. I was raised as an adopted child, so I'm not fixated on blood relations. I even thought about adopting when I got older. My husband, Henry, is understanding. He always says, if we're blessed with a child, I'll mainly take care of it and support you. People who can't have children might envy us, but as someone who was abandoned by her parents, I couldn't be irresponsible. Friends' kids who were in elementary school or kindergarten seemed well-educated and cute. Maybe children born out of desire feel their parents' love. Of course, I consider the two who raised me as my real parents, and I'm grateful for them. I have an older sister who is 2 years my senior. Her name is Linda. Our parents wanted siblings but could only have one, so they adopted me. We got along well when we were young, but she started to dislike me as I had better grades. You wouldn't be compared, and all the money would have been spent on me if you weren't here, she once said. For the sake of my parents' honor, I must say that they showered both of us with love and resources, not just mentally but emotionally too. They never compared us, not once. It was only Linda who felt inferior on her own. She just chose not to study, whereas I did. That led to comparisons, and it was frustrating for me, maybe because she hated studying. Linda decided to pursue a career as an internet idol, using our parents' money to purchase all the necessary equipment. However, she never truly put in the effort. Looking at successful people, one might think it's easy, but it requires relentless work. That was always Linda's problem, underestimating things. Despite not lacking in looks, Linda had her fans, and among them, the most generous was Mark. They ended up in a shotgun marriage, perhaps because Linda thought he was wealthy. Unfortunately, it turned out he was in debt from spending on her. Even our parents hesitated, but not wanting to see their grandchild suffer, they paid off his debts and secured him a job. The job paid well. With Linda and her husband's lives finally stabilizing, unfortunately, Linda's poor financial sense persisted, preventing them from saving anything. Then, one day, Linda's daughter, Karen, suddenly fell ill. There were signs earlier, but Linda's reluctance to seek medical help due to stinginess had delayed intervention. When I arrived after Linda's urgent call, Karen was lying in bed connected to tubes. I was informed that Karen's kidneys were failing, and they wanted me to get tested to see if I was a match. While I would have refused if it were just for Linda's sake, I was fond of Karen. She was remarkably sensible for a 7-year-old, and I often thought of her as the kind of daughter I'd like. Despite my expectations, I turned out to be a match. Please, I'll definitely make it up to you. Save Karen, Linda begged. I wanted to believe her sincerity, so I agreed to the test. After the successful operation, Karen was out of danger. However, the real challenges emerged afterward. Linda hadn't insured Karen, leading to substantial medical costs. Then, Linda approached me again, pleading for financial assistance. I can't ask our parents anymore, and I need this to be kept secret, she confided. I wondered about Mark's role, given his decent salary from the job Dad had found for him. But Linda sneered. That salary is nothing if our parents find out about our spending. Mark might get fired, and we'd be on the streets. Is that what you want? Though tempted to agree, especially with Karen's health at stake, I couldn't bear to see her being used as a pawn. I'll lend you the money, but you have to write a promissory note, I insisted. Linda reluctantly agreed, signing the note without bothering to read it. Reflecting on this, I realized why Linda never managed to save any money. Her habit of exploiting situations, even her daughter's illness, was despicable. Despite having such parents, Karen turned out well, which impressed me greatly. After that, I began visiting Karen's hospital room more often. Was it because I had donated a kidney or because I had lent them money? No, it was out of pity for Karen. Karen mentioned to me that I visited more frequently than Linda, who now seemed to regard me with coldness. After a lengthy course of treatment, Karen ended up needing a wheelchair for mobility. Then, on the day she was to be discharged, an incident occurred. An unknown number called, and since it was my day off, I answered. "Hello, is this Sarah's phone?" "This is General Hospital," the voice said. "Karen's hospital. Thank you." "You have the right number," I replied. "Sorry to bother you, but Karen's hospital bill is unpaid, and today she's supposed to be discharged. But no one has come for her, and we can't reach her parents." A sudden chill ran down my spine, and my heart clenched. Without realizing it, I was already on my way to the hospital. I got into a taxi and called Linda. "What are you doing today? Is today Karen's discharge day?" I couldn't stay calm and ended up shouting. "Can you lower your voice?" "I can hear you," Linda replied calmly. "I don't want that kid, so I'm giving her to you. It's perfect since you can't have children, right? If you can't have your own, at least contribute to society by raising one." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're the worst, just like my birth parents. You don't deserve to be a parent," I exclaimed. "And what about the hospital bills?" I could hear Linda's laughter over the phone. "Sorry, I spent it. It's hard to resist when you suddenly get a lot of money. I've been wanting to do something for a while. It's useless to tell Mark. He can't go against me. He married an idol like he wanted. He can't resist me. He's fine with getting rid of the child anyway. We can't pay, so if you don't take her, she might as well be gone, right?" I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. I don't remember, but maybe my birth parents were like this, I thought. This is my battle of mourning, a revenge against the parents who abandoned me, more than anything. I couldn't bear the thought of handing Karen over to Linda. "Fine, I'll pay the hospital bills and take Karen as my child. Consider it a severance payment," I declared. "Really? I was worried about how to repay the money I borrowed." "But you'll pay that too?" Linda's heartless reasoning appalled me. With a total of $100,000 gained and a chance to reset my life, the idea of abandoning a daughter in a wheelchair to have another child solely for future support felt utterly repugnant. I didn't want to continue the conversation. I hung up, apologizing profusely to the hospital, completing the payment promptly, and arranging, through lawyers, a private adoption for Karen to officially become our child. When Karen officially became ours, I was apprehensive about Henry's reaction. To my relief, he embraced the decision warmly. "That's why I love you," he said tenderly. "I can't forgive Linda either. A family of 3 will surely be fun." His words moved me to tears. I felt immensely grateful to have married such a wonderful person. My parents probably thought it was best for Karen's rehabilitation and care to be with us. They even offered to help. Linda seemed somewhat resentful, perhaps worried about our parents discovering the truth about the money. She didn't dare visit. When I honestly explained the situation to Karen, she surprised me with her calm acceptance. "So Mom and Dad never visited me. Now, Sarah, you're my mom." "Sorry if I'm not used to it yet," she said softly. Though she accepted it outwardly, I could sense her silent tears. I used to think I had so many things I wanted to do, but now, Karen has become my reason for living. Having been involved with her since birth, albeit indirectly, it didn't take long for me to develop deep affection. Witnessing a young child struggling and crying during rehabilitation, even if she's not my biological child, filled me with determination to support her. Karen was a real trooper, finding ways to overcome obstacles with her indomitable spirit. Despite her disability, Karen always gave her best, and I, consumed by supporting her to the fullest, forgot about the money concerns. With the unwavering support of my parents, Karen grew rapidly through rehabilitation. She gained some movement in her right leg, still relying on a wheelchair but becoming more capable with each passing day. When Karen turned 9, she expressed a desire to emulate a particular person. By then, she had grown accustomed to calling me Mom and Henry Dad. She showed me a video of a blind pianist. "That's cool, but it must be hard, right? Don't you need a special sense for that?" I asked. To my astonishment, Karen opened a piano app on her tablet and effortlessly played the piece from the video. Did you practice a lot? I inquired. Well, I just listened and remembered it. It's kind of like I just get it, she explained. Impressed, I asked her to play a commercial jingle from TV, and once again, she flawlessly reproduced it after hearing it just once. That's incredible. Maybe you have perfect pitch, I mused. Excitedly, I showed Henry, who was equally amazed. Let's buy a grand piano and maybe build a bigger room for it. Perhaps we should consider building a new house, he suggested. Over the next 2 years, Henry had become a devoted father, always spoiling Karen. 5 years later, Linda reached out through our parents, prompting a discussion. I left the kids with my parents and met Linda and Mark in the living room of my childhood home, careful not to reveal our current address. What do you want? I asked bluntly, noticing the drastic changes in Linda's appearance. You moved away and cut off all contact. And what's with that figure? I hardly recognize you, I added. My parents had informed me that Linda was amidst divorce proceedings due to infidelity, and she had gained weight from overeating and drinking. Mark was there, seemingly coerced by Linda. He probably wanted to see his daughter one last time, but he seemed disappointed not to find her there. Since then, Linda and Mark hadn't had any more children, and I couldn't help but see it as poetic justice. I would lose faith in any god that would repeatedly bless such irresponsible people with children. However, I remained grateful that they gave me Karen. You're not asking for money again, are you? I asked skeptically as Linda began her plea. Please, I need treatment. I've developed diabetes from binge eating and drinking. I can't work, and the treatment is expensive. We may not be blood related, but we're still sisters, right? Help me, she pleaded, her gestures seeming insincere. I began by returning the $50,000. Linda looked confused. You didn't read the promissory note, did you? I guess you don't have it anymore. That money is a settled issue, isn't it? It's insincere to bring it up now, she retorted, her tone grating on my nerves. Irritated, I decided to enlighten her. I only waived the money I paid for your hospitalization. I never said anything about waiving the loan. You misunderstood. And since we couldn't find you, we gave up. Remember, I said I'd take the hospital and surgery expenses as severance. You haven't repaid the money you embezzled, but now I can claim it, I explained. Linda, defiant as ever, responded, I came here because I have no money, and now you're going to bill me? Just then, the door of the next room swung open, revealing Karen. Dignified even with pain etched on her face, Karen had inherited all the good features from Linda, making her an extraordinary beauty. Is that Karen? You've grown? Linda exclaimed, attempting to regain control. Look, you can tell, right? She's grown up to be so much like me. Karen's disdainful look was palpable. Who are you? She asked coldly, her tone cutting through the tension. Karen, don't talk like that. She's your mom, Linda insisted. Karen pointed at me and Henry. Mom is right here, and Dad is next to her, she declared firmly. I felt tears welling up. I had become a doting parent too, something I never thought would happen. Besides, you have a $50,000 debt and are getting divorced, right? How are you going to raise Karen, who still needs a wheelchair? I interjected. Mark can take care of it, Linda replied arrogantly. Of course, he can't defy me. Seriously, is she an idiot? She muttered under her breath, unaware that Karen was already defying her by going through divorce proceedings. Then, unexpectedly, Mark stood up, declaring, Enough is enough. I'm fed up. I can't stand it anymore, Sarah. I'm sorry for everything. I promised to pay off the debt. Mark, who had always been submissive, was now red-faced and angry at Linda. I'll take over the compensation money for you and start over. The debt is only being shouldered temporarily. I don't want to trouble Karen anymore. Even if I'm a failed father, I must take responsibility. Addressing Linda directly, Mark continued, I heard from friends that you've been bad-mouthing me behind my back. Now you have 0 fans. You're betraying me too. Linda tried to act tough, but Mark's words seemed to hit her hard. Her face turned bright red as Mark turned to us and said he would contact us later, then left. While I didn't sympathize with Mark, I hoped he wouldn't be brainwashed again by Linda. Then Henry dropped a bombshell. By the way, Mom and Dad know about your current debt. They told me not to come out today. They didn't want to see their own daughter's downfall and wanted to protect my son. Linda had misunderstood. Not wanting kids and being unable to have them are entirely different. We just chose not to, I clarified. I patiently explained the adoption to Linda, informing her that she no longer had parental rights. Linda blustered one last time before finally relenting. As she left in a hurry, I showed her a video site featuring Karen. "What's this? Why is Karen in it?" Linda asked. "Karen has perfect pitch. We made videos of her playing impromptu piano pieces as part of her rehabilitation, and they went viral. She's now a famous influencer for her beauty and talent," I explained. Since then, Mark had apologized and worked hard, borrowing money from my parents for the job they'd helped him get. My father trusted Mark and decided to lend him the money interest-free, with a promise that Mark would pay back monthly. Now Linda, with no one to turn to and estranged, was reportedly suffering from diabetes and living on welfare. She was unrecognizable from her days as an internet idol. I had initially thought Karen would thwart my dreams, but thanks to her, my dreams had come true. Karen had received numerous invitations to perform worldwide, not just as a wheelchair pianist, but for her pure talent. My dream was to travel the world, and I fully support Karen as her manager, I proudly declared. As Karen's popularity soared, she often returned to America to spend time with the family. Recently, Karen thanked me out of the blue. "Because of you, Mom, I have this life. Your kidney inside me will never be apart, and that makes me happy." These words from Karen were what I had longed to hear, echoing my own feelings towards my birth parents. Karen's music continued to enrich the soul, and I couldn't help but feel vindicated. If Linda hadn't been so twisted, perhaps her life would have been different. Without even seeing them, I felt I understood the likely unhappy lives of my birth parents. Karen had truly become a beacon of light in our lives. My name is Karen, and I'm a 25-year-old employee. 6 months ago, my grandfather, who raised me, passed away. Today marks the date when the lawyer will open my grandfather's will. That's why I find myself at my grandfather's house, accompanied by my sister Susan, who is 4 years older and my only family. Our parents tragically passed away in an accident 20 years ago, leaving us in the care of our grandparents. Since our grandmother succumbed to illness a few years back, our grandfather's health had been deteriorating steadily, and he frequently fell ill. Out of concern, I lived in an apartment near his house and often checked on him. "You're a grown woman. It's unbecoming to keep coming back home," my grandfather would jest, although he was always cheerful. Then, one day, as I went to visit him as usual, I found him in pain at the entrance. In a panic, I called for an ambulance, but he passed away suddenly. "Hey, what are you daydreaming for? At least prepare some tea," my sister's voice snapped me back to reality. "Right, the lawyer will be here soon," I responded, heading to the kitchen. Glancing back, I saw my sister lazily stretching out her legs on the mat, yawning. Even in the kitchen, I could still catch a whiff of her strong perfume, and I made a face. "She's the same as always," I murmured under my breath, placing the kettle on the stove. My sister had always been self-centered. As a teenager, she dyed her hair and associated with troublemakers, always demanding money without working. Even when her antics caused trouble, she remained unfazed, leaving me to deal with the fallout. It seemed she hadn't changed much as an adult, with no stable job and drifting around, relying on part-time work. I knew she had been asking our grandfather for money when I wasn't around, and I could only imagine how she'd find it troublesome if not for the inheritance. "Ah, you must be the lawyer. Thank you for coming today." I heard my sister's high-pitched, formal voice announcing the lawyer's arrival. Hurriedly, I placed tea leaves into the teapot and made my way back to the entrance. "Thank you for coming today," I greeted the lawyer. I had met him at the funeral, and his eyes held the same kindness as my grandfather's. A lawyer's badge gleamed on his chest. After we offered incense in front of my grandfather's portrait, he graciously accepted the tea I served before retrieving my grandfather's will. It had been entrusted to him while my grandfather was still alive. The contents were straightforward. My elder sister Susan was to inherit $20 million in cash, and I, the younger daughter, was to inherit this house and the land it sits on, I read aloud. Upon hearing this, my sister burst into laughter. 20 million in cash for the elder daughter, and only an old house for the younger one? How hilarious. "It's just right for someone as plain as you," she remarked with a sneer. "It's not just the house. There's also the land," I retorted, to which she chuckled snidely. "Huh, the value of this land in such a god-forsaken place is hardly surprising." "Ah, I would have preferred cash. I guess Grandpa must have had a soft spot for me after all," she commented. I can't deny that I am a bit shocked. I suppose my grandfather wanted me to protect his beloved house and land, where he spent his life with my grandmother, I replied thoughtfully. "Huh? A house and land? That's pretty awesome, isn't it?" Brian, my boyfriend, exclaimed in surprise after hearing my story. I shook my head, implying it's not as great as it sounds. "Not really. My sister inherited 20 million in cash. That's more impressive," I admitted, feeling a sense of emptiness as I said it aloud. Even though I was being modest, verbalizing it felt like an acknowledgement. "Wow. Beautiful and have money. Now she's the more the better victory," Brian remarked insensitively. Shooting him a side glance, I noted his gap in sensitivity. Realizing his misstep, he joked, "Your comfort means more to me than money, Karen." Brian had been my boyfriend since I started working. We met at a social event, and being of the same age, we clicked well. I introduced him to my grandfather and my sister. While he hadn't proposed yet, I had been considering marriage. Today was our first date in the wild, and I ended up telling Brian about my inheritance. I suppose it was because I thought he would become my husband someday. I had no idea I would come to regret this. A few days later, I found myself visiting the family home I had inherited from my grandfather. I had intended to clean and sort out my grandfather's belongings. The property was large, but the house was modest. I figured I could manage it on my own. As I looked around the house, I pondered, it's close to my workplace. Maybe I should move here. Living here leisurely with a cat doesn't sound too bad. There would be no rent to pay, and while there might be maintenance costs for deterioration, I have been working hard and saving, so it shouldn't be a problem. Maybe someday with Brian. Feeling embarrassed at the thought, I shook my head vigorously and rolled up my sleeves to begin cleaning. Just then, I received a call. My sister's name appeared on my smartphone screen. "Sis, what's up?" I answered. "Hey, Karen, having fun all by yourself in that old house?" My sister sounded drunk. She always had a unique way of extending her words, but today it was particularly bad. "Since you're drinking, aren't you?" "It's still afternoon," I pointed out with a sigh, to which she exaggeratedly sighed back. "Oh, you're such a Miss Goody Two-Shoes." I was right. She had been drinking. "I was thinking about moving here," I confessed. Eventually, I answered my sister's question, hoping to end the conversation quickly. "Really? I'm enjoying a suite in a luxury hotel right now." My sister raised her voice in a somewhat exaggerated way. "Guess who I'm with right now?" "I have no idea," I replied flatly. "Boring. It's that kind of attitude that'll make Brian dislike you," she retorted. "What?" I was taken aback when Brian's voice unexpectedly intervened on the line. His sudden intervention threw me off balance, and dizzying question marks popped up in my head. But I resented my imagination. At this point, a disgusting scenario had already formed in my mind. "Surprised? Huh?" My sister's mean-spirited voice chimed in. "Ever since you introduced him to me, I thought Brian was quite a catch." She proceeded to boast about how she had been attracted to Brian since I introduced him, how she knew where he worked because of me, and how she had approached him as soon as he left work. He readily came along when she asked, telling her that she was hundreds of times more attractive than me. Stunned into silence, I listened to her revelations. Karen, I'm really sorry. Brian's voice broke the silence. Tell me it's a mistake, I managed to utter, but he spoke again before I could continue. As a man, I had to take this opportunity. Brian justified, his tone as if asking me to understand. I do feel bad about it, but come on, it's impossible to resist a beautiful woman who has $20 million, right? The way he spoke, as if seeking my approval, drained my emotions away. I felt a cold sensation, as if my blood was being drained from me. You know what? I don't need a man like you, I finally uttered. At my words, I could hear my sister laughing uproariously in the background. The voice on the phone changed back to my sister's. Well, that's how it is, and from now on, let's not consider ourselves sisters, okay? I wouldn't want you turning to me just because you're broke. My sister's words echoed in my ears as she ended the call. Overwhelmed by emotions that had lagged behind, all I could do was cry out. 5 years had passed since then. I had a cat in my lap, dozing off in front of my laptop, purring contentedly in sleep. Today was my day off, but there was still a bit of work left from what I brought home. Oh no, this won't get the work done, I murmured guiltily as I gently moved the cat off my lap. Just as I reached out, my phone started to ring, displaying an unfamiliar number on my smartphone. Thinking it could be work-related, I answered the call without any suspicion. Hello? I greeted. Karen, long time no see. The voice on the other end instantly made me freeze. It was unmistakably my sister's distinctive way of speaking. It's you, Karen, isn't it? I can tell just from your initial hello. After all, I'm your big sister. 5 years had passed, which should make Susan 34. A smirk formed at the corner of my mouth at her unchanging way of talking. You're just the same, I remarked. By the way, I came home and there's a hotel standing. Did you sell the house? Susan inquired. That's none of your business, I replied curtly. Oh, come on. It's quite a grand hotel, huh? You must have made a good chunk of change, huh? She prodded. Getting fed up. I was about to end the call when she started to chatter about her current situation. According to Susan, she had blown through the inheritance in about 2 years and now had a considerable amount of debt. Even Brian, whom she was still hanging around, seemed to be drowning in debt. I was speechless. Honestly, I couldn't care less. So, lend me some money, Susan demanded. Against Susan's yelling, I answered calmly, I've always wondered why Grandpa distributed his estate that way, but on the day you took Brian from me and cut ties, I understood. I started talking slowly. 5 years ago, when Brian broke up with me, I was crushed. After crying my heart out, I sat dazed in my room, staring into space. I'm such a fool, I murmured as large tears began to spill again. My gaze fell on a painting I had made as a child and had gifted to my grandfather. He had framed it and kept it hanging lovingly. Rising unsteadily, I picked up the painting. Grandpa, I whispered. When feelings of nostalgia and loneliness welled up and tears started to come, I felt something drop from the back of the frame. Picking it up, I saw it was a fresh sheet of notepaper addressed to me. I remembered how, when I was little, I used to stick notes on the back of this frame and exchange secret messages with my grandfather. It was like a family journal, really. Knowing that I was to inherit the house, he probably figured I'd find this note. I'm glad I noticed. I shuddered at the thought that I might have left it unnoticed. To Karen, the date on the letter was just before my grandfather passed. I knew you definitely noticed this letter. Right now, you're probably wondering why I distributed my estate in such a manner, cash to your sister, and an old house and land for you. It may seem like I favored Susan, but that's not the case. Despite any claims of favoritism, I wanted to leave most of my estate to you, who cared for me till the end. I finally understood what had been bothering me. No matter what, Grandpa thought more of me, huh? I muttered. I'm sure I was deeply hurt by Susan's words at that time. Despite having loved my grandfather more, a kind of jealousy clouded my thoughts as I continued to read the letter. But Susan would not be satisfied with a regular division. This child, even as her grandfather, I must admit, she's terribly greedy. Exactly, Grandpa. She even took my boyfriend from me. That's what I want to tell him in my heart. That's why I arranged it this way. If at first glance Susan appears to have received the better deal, she won't pay attention to your share. According to grandfather's letter, the value of this land in our area is continuously increasing due to ongoing urban development. As of the time he wrote the letter, it's not worth Susan's $20 million yet, but the value of this land will surely increase in the future. When I read this far, my eyes widened in surprise. You can live here if you're attached to it, or you can sell it when its value rises enough to make a good profit. All I want is for you to be happy, the letter conveyed. When I finished conveying the content of the letter, Susan clicked her tongue and said, "Hag." I lived in that house for a while, but when my marriage was settled, I decided to sell the house. Just like grandfather's letter said, the land value had risen enough anyway. I'm never lending you money. Susan seemed frustrated, but as if she had a good idea, she said, "Right. If you want, I can give Brian back to you, so help your sister. It's a good deal, right?" At that moment, I heard something snap inside of me. Enough is enough. You've been taken care of by Grandpa, and yet you haven't shown a hint of gratitude. I despise you for that, and you're not my sister anymore. Besides, I'm already married. I don't need Brian, and I don't even want to see his face. Stay out of my life for good. I said what I needed to say and hung up. I quickly set up call blocking, and my cat on my lap was cowering on the bed. I quickly picked up my cat and said, "I'm sorry." After that, it seems Susan contacted Brian, and they both stormed into our old house. Did they try to return Brian to me? There's a respectable end there now, but they must have misunderstood something and were shouting that they were my relatives, even though I just sold the land and had nothing to do with it. It's simple for those two, sold the land, and an end was built equals I must be the owner of the end. Of course, the staff reported to the police. The two of them were arrested because they had destroyed several items in the end. Furthermore, it was discovered that they had been committing marriage fraud for money in the past. Seems they'll be sent to prison together. I was also questioned by the police, but I was able to prove that I had no involvement quickly as we were estranged and was released. As my husband, who came to pick me up, and I were walking through the station, we heard screaming and turned our gaze, and there were Susan and Brian, who looked completely different. Fortunately, they didn't notice us. Both of them had messy hair, worn-out clothes, and looked nothing like the two people I remember, especially Susan, who never skipped her makeup and fashion, looked even more different. They were probably being moved into a different location. As I watched the two of them, filled with a sense of melancholy, my husband and I locked eyes. I grabbed the hand he extended, and we left the police station. "Are you okay?" My husband, always concerned, looked at me with gentle eyes. "I'm okay. I have you and this little one," I said, touching my fairly noticeable belly, and smiled back. "In my belly, a new member of our family is growing."